Welcome back to the Shift RSA. Believe it or not, this is the second time we're filming this car because I had major audio issues the first time around. I spent a whole day filming the car only to get home and start editing and find that the audio had glitched. Here's an example of what that sounds like. If you can't be bothered by looking at the boost gauge. So today you join me in the Fiat 500 Abarth Essesse, which is basically a normal Fiat 500 with some added sulfire sauce. The baseline figures for this car are 118 kilowatt, 230 newton meters of torque, and that comes from an inline 4 petrol engine via a 5-speed manual gearbox. So what is the Fiat 500 Abarth Essesse all about? The 500 is a modern interpretation of the classic Fiat 500, and they've basically gone mad and decided to tune it. So this 1.4 turbo engine is really punchy. You wouldn't expect a car that looks like this to sound and drive the way that this one does. And that's all thanks to Abarth taking the car off of the Fiat 500 production line and basically tarting it up back at their headquarters. Abarth has been taking Fiat since the early 50s and turning them into little weapons. And I really think they are to thank for such a wonderfully refined product. Yes, the quality in here isn't incredible, and yes, there are some flaws in the car, but they really made sure that this car serves its sole purpose, and that's to put a big smile on your face. Let's start with the power. So, as I've mentioned, the car is very unsuspecting. It looks like every other Fiat 500, but it has a lot more power. The fact that it has 118 kilowatts and 230 newton meters of torque, it's not really numbers that's going to blow your hair back. But if you consider the fact that it comes in such a small compact package, then those numbers tend to make a lot more sense. I don't think you're going to win any drag races against any hot hatches, and I think the Mini Cooper S would give this thing a hiding in a straight line, but I don't think that's necessarily what this car is about. But having said that, the power really never feels lacking. It doesn't feel like you're missing out on anything. I'm going to give it a slight squirt now. That's more than enough. In a car this size, that's a lot of fun. So as I've said, it never feels like you have a shortage of power, and in this form factor, I tend to think it's very fun how you work for your speed. I love the fact that the car comes with a manual gearbox, and it really allows you to engage with the car. You become such a part of that process of building speed, and it's just so rewarding. So nice. And I just love the induction noises. This car is very naughty. It's got a ram air intake, and that really gives you some nice induction noises. You hear all the whooshes and all the blowing and sucking noises. It's very nice. Once you get to 3000 RPM, the power really comes in and you get that surge of boost, but before that it's pretty flat. As long as you stay in the second half of that rev range. You should be happy. You've got power on tap. You have more than enough to pull you out of corners, and it's quite pokey. I quite love poking this thing a little bit and hearing it sort of shout back at me as it hurls its way forward. Many people will think that this doesn't belong in the local car scene, especially in South Africa, and I tend to disagree. I understand why people would think that, because we do have sort of a very old mentality when it comes to cars. It has to have a big engine, it has to make a crazy noise, it has to go crazy speeds, and it has to be the biggest, baddest car on the block. I tend to disagree for the simple fact that the Italians really know their way around a car, and they always go about speed in a very special way, and I think that's what's going on here. Now let's talk about the handling. So there's one point I really want to touch on. Other than the fact that it has great Koni suspension, the fact that the steering is very weighted, especially in sport mode, and there's quite a tangible difference in that between sport mode and regular mode. other than those things, there's such a funny sensation going on here. So the seating position is very high. I mean, the car does take a little bubble form, so you can almost expect that. But we often associate a high seating position with a car that either wants to lean or that's quite top heavy. Not the case in this car. It's very stiff, it's very composed, and it's a funny sensation going very fast in a car like this, seated as high as I am. But when you flick it into corners, it feels very well composed, and it really inspires confidence. Look, as far as gadgets go, as far as controls go, there's not much in here that's going to entice you. It's got a CD player, it's got Bluetooth, but I don't think that's why you're here. I think if you drive this car, don't even use the radio. So the brakes in here are very good as well. Both discs are vented. I think in a small car you don't always need big brakes, but these are definitely more than enough to scrub some speed. And if you really need to stand on them, good. Then let's get on to the comfort. So it's as comfortable as you would expect a small car like this to be, with a good racing setup suspension and on low profile tires. You do feel the little bumps. It can be a bit annoying. If you're going to drive this car daily, I think you might get a bit annoyed. I believe that cars like this were made for people who live in small cities with little cobblestone roads, not necessarily the Abarth, but the original 500. So I understand the setup they're going for, and they're not necessarily going for a big luxury car that just soaks up the bumps. I think in this trim you can expect a harsh ride as well, but you really do appreciate it once the road gets rough, or once the road gets twisty, and you want to make full use of that lovely chassis and its stiff suspension. One complaint that I do have in here is the fact that, and maybe it's just because I'm uncomfortably tall, but the fact that I have zero to no headroom. I constantly feel a little brush above my head, and that's the roof reminding me that I'm freakishly tall. I do think it could be down to the sunroof, because if you didn't have the sunroof, you wouldn't have this bump over here, right over here, and then there would be no intrusion in your headspace. This is one of those cars where all the parts of the car come together to provide a unique driving experience. No, it's not all about straight line speed. No, it's not the best canyon carver, but it's an incredibly fun car to drive, and it provides a very unique experience. I remember the first time I drove this car, I couldn't stop smiling, and I'm really fighting it now, because every time you do a bit of spirited driving, it's just so rewarding. The experience is so analog and it's so raw. The sounds the car makes are so good, and that's such an Italian thing to do. There's nothing boring about this car. If you consider the fact that other super minis, which fall in this class, if you consider the fact that they can be quite mundane, they try and do every single thing right. It has to be a good student car, it has to be a good first car, it has to be a good daily driver, it has to be comfortable, all those things. Once you start trying to tick so many boxes, you're bound to lose some magic, and this car is missing no magic whatsoever. So to summarize, I think the Fiat 500 Abarth Essesse is such a special little thing. I really think there's a place in car culture for cars like these. I think you'll find a more cultured consumer. I think you'll find someone that's either really passionate about the brand or that really falls in love with the entire package. And I really commend people like Cameron, who owns this car, for taking the time to get to know a car like this, purchasing it, driving it, showing it off, bringing it to local car meets, and really just enjoying his car. I think if you're the kind of person that cares what other people think about you, don't get this car, because you're going to get remarks. People are going to call it a little Tupperware. They're going to say that's not a real car. They're going to say it's a hairdresser's car. But they don't understand. So that's it for today's video, guys. I really hope you've enjoyed. I really hope I was able to capture the essence of this car and give you a good review of what it's all about. I also want to take a minute to thank people that have been very supportive so far friends of mine, crew members, family, who have been liking and commenting and engaging with me in this platform. It really means a lot, and I really hope it's a sign of things to come. So stay safe out there on the roads, and until next time,